This is continuing Chapter 4, Sensation and Perception, Part 4. Okay, so when we left off, we were coming up to talking about sensation versus perception. Remember now, sensation involves the detection, conversion, and transmission of raw data that's going to be provided through our sensory receptors. However, in order to make sense of these sensations, we kind of need our brains to be able to select, to be able to organize, as well as interpret the sensory information. This is what we call perception. Okay, so we're going to talk about two types of processing. And this is also going to be one of those slides that I'm going to want you to pause after I explain these two processes, okay? Make sure you pause and do the exercise that's going to follow. All right, so as mentioned, there are two types of processing. Bottom-up or top-down processing. When we're first learning to read, we discovered that there's certain arrangements of lines, like squiggles, that would represent specific letters. This is when we're talking about bottom-up processing. Only, later on, did we discover that these letters join together to make up words? Well, today, after years of experience in language training, we kind of quickly can perceive the words within a sentence before the individual letters. This is what we call top-down processing. Finally, being able to recall that we began this chapter with first discussing how we receive sensory information, that's sensation, and work our way upward to the top levels of perceptual processing, which is perception. Psychologists refer to this type of information processing as being bottom-up processing. In contrast, we have top-down processing. Now, this begins with higher top-level type of processing, which involves our thoughts, our previous experiences, our expectations, as well as our language, and even our cultural background. And what it does is it works down to that sensory level. So now, here's the pause moment. Take a look and tell me if you can read this sentence. All right, hopefully you paused and we're back again. By now you should have been able to look at it and read it just as if the words were spelled correctly. And I'll read it for those who didn't get a chance to. Now, your ability to read using top-down processing makes it possible to understand this sentence despite its many misspellings. Even though there's so many misspellings, our minds allow us to organize it the way we first learned it, so that as long as those letters are in place somewhere, because of the way it's organized, our mind is going to automatically be able to see it in the correct state. All right? So let's keep going. Science and ESP. Now, so far in this chapter, we've been able to talk about sensations, how it's been provided through our eyes, our ears, our nose, our mouth, even our skin. What about that sixth sense everybody talk about? And by the way, did you see the movie The Sixth Sense? I love that movie. Good thriller. But back to the topic at hand. Can some people perceive things that cannot be perceived with the usual sensory channels? By using extrasensory perception, and that's what it means for ESP, extrasensory perception. There are people who claim to be able to have ESP, and they profess to be able to read other people's minds, which is telepathy. They're able to perceive objects or events that are inaccessible to the normal senses. Those individuals are considered to be clairvoyant. You'll have some who say they can predict the future. These individuals would say they have precognition, or be able to move objects without touching them at all. This is psychokinesis. Now, think back when we talked about in chapter 1. All of these claims would fall under pseudopsychology. Y'all remember that term, right? And the claims of psychics such as these have been successfully debunked. Y'all remember Randy? Perhaps, though, the most serious weakness of parapsychology would be the failure of being able to replicate uh, these different situations by independent laboratories or different rivals. So, because that we don't have that ability, we seem to be skeptical about it. Remember, we're scientists. We think science first. We have to prove what we claim that exists. Furthermore, those findings in ESP, they're going to be notoriously fragile. And that's because they do not hold up to intense scrutiny. All right, so I'm now going to show you that I possess psychic power. Believe it or not. So in order for me to demonstrate this, I need for you to listen carefully. Okay? I want you to take a moment and silently choose a number that's going to be between 2 and 9. Now, multiply that number by 9. Once you've done that, add the 2 digits of the resulting number. Subtract 5 from that result. Now, I want you to stop and think of the letter in the alphabet that would correspond with the number arrived at step number 4. Take time and write down the name of a country that begins with this letter. Now, do me a favor though. Do not look at everything on the internet to help you with this. Do it yourself, okay? This is going to help me be able to channel in on the information that you're giving me right now. All right, so for an assignment, what I'm going to include in the assignment is I'm going to want you to write down the name of an animal that begins with the last letter of that country that you thought of. Write down the name of a color that begins with the last letter of that animal. Then take time to look at and concentrate on that listed country, the animal, as well as the color. Because now at this point, I think I'm going to be able to feel it and I'll be able to read your mind. And I'm not going to know what you have right now as you're watching this. You'll write down your responses within the assignment, but if, let's see. Okay, here's what's coming to me. There are no orange kangaroos in Denmark. So I'm thinking the majority of you got orange, kangaroo, and Denmark for your responses. Matter of fact, I don't even want you to write it in the assignment. You just can send me a message letting me know yes or no, and that's all. Okay? Let's see. Was I actually being psychic? You let me know. Orange, kangaroo, and Denmark, again, was those responses that I believe I felt through the video that y'all all gave me. All right, so let's get back to work. I had to take a moment. Sometimes we need to break things up a little bit. So now in terms of talking about critical thinking, why do so many people believe in ESP? In this discussion, we need to look at the fallacy and positive instances, as well as confirmation bias that's covered within the text, and able to think about how to go about looking at the answers. For one, vividness problem, our abilities to be able to recall and remember, and that we need to have a more vivid and dramatic information. The more vivid that information is, the better you can recall it, the better you can sap out other information. Okay? That's what some psychics will be able to do. With the numeracy, this is failing to be able to recognize the changes of occurrences for what they are, owing to a lack of training within statistics and probabilities. Confirmation bias is talking about how we'll note and remember events that confirms our expectation and beliefs. That's what we could call the hits. And then we don't really think about things that doesn't have much evidence to it. And those are the misses. And usually there's a willingness to suspend disbelief. We like to see something different and something magical, so to speak. So refusing to engage in one's normal critical thinking skills is because you kind of wish that it was a true fact, or something that you can actually learn in terms of your personal needs in regards to your power and your control. Something to think about. All right. So at this point, we are done with chapter 4. You've already received all assignments for chapter 4, so I will not be providing an assignment, but I did want to give you this last part of the chapter within a lecture. So that's the only thing you have to do for this particular assignment is just watch the video. I will be also posting shortly the beginning of part 1 for chapter 5, States of Consciousness. It's a really good, interesting chapter, so look forward to sharing that information with you. And as this is a weekend now, this is Friday, y'all have a great weekend, okay? And I will update you shortly.